We've just got some breaking news in from Buckingham Palace, folks. So this statement has just come in from Buckingham Palace and I'll read it for you. It goes on to say, His Majesty has today initiated a formal process to remove the style, titles and...
Although the palace had previously seen scandals, criticism and uncertain times, nothing had prepared the royal family for the revelation that altered the public's perception of their personal hardships. Princess Charlotte's emotional struggle during Catherine's cancer treatment was revealed by Prince William and Catherine, who acknowledged that they could no longer conceal the impact it had on their daughter. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any updates before we delve further into what this actually implies for the royal family. William was aware that every phrase would have significance that went much beyond a straightforward family declaration. Torn between his deepest instinct as a father who wished to shield his child from public pressure and his role as the heir anticipated to lead the monarchy in the future, he meticulously prepared his message. The Wales family has always attempted to balance the responsibilities of royal duty with providing a secure environment for their kids. However, they were compelled to share a painful reality at this particular moment. The hardest aspect of the announcement, in Catherine's opinion, was acknowledging how much the experience affected her daughter rather than discussing her personal difficulties. During her sickness, the princess recalled quiet chats with Charlotte, times when a normally self-assured youngster was overcome with doubt. In addition to dealing with a health problem, the family's challenge was to safeguard the next generation's mental environment. The pair revealed that Charlotte had experienced emotional difficulties while her mother was receiving treatment in a private recorded discussion that was prepared for the announcement. The comment demonstrated that the struggle was not exclusive to one individual, which completely altered the crisis's significance. It affected the kids who had been passively observing everything as it happened, reaching deep into the family's heart. Later, William thought about the choice in private. He knew that disclosing Charlotte's suffering may draw unwelcome attention, but keeping it a secret might keep the emotional injury hidden. Catherine had the same anxiety. However, she felt that honesty was essential because her daughter's emotions were equally as important as royal expectations. Family protection and public responsibility clashed at the announcement. Charlotte's experience exposed a secret aspect of palace life, where titles and customs were unable to dispel anxiety, grief, or the need for comfort. At last, the family had come to terms with what had been going on behind the scenes. However, the announcement raised an even more challenging query. What specifically transpired during those months of concealment that resulted in such emotional suffering, and who among the royal circle was aware of the conflict before anybody else? There was a much deeper tale behind the well-chosen words and heartfelt declaration, one that involved private discussions, tough choices, and a time that would eventually compel William and Catherine to face what had really transpired within their own family. For Charlotte, being a princess meant something else behind the castle gates. It stood for custom, accountability, and expectation. However, it also required her to develop emotional intelligence well beyond her years. The young royal, who had silently carried fear, confusion, and heartbreak while witnessing her mother struggle through the most difficult period of her life, came into focus as William and Catherine disclosed the truth. Charlotte had long been regarded as a representation of the future of the monarchy. Beneath that picture, however, was a toddler attempting to comprehend feelings that no child should have to endure. As William and Catherine's only child, she stood between Louis, whose younger age gave him greater freedom from royal pressure, and George, whose future role placed high expectations on him. Her experience was special because she was trying to understand her own emotions while also learning what duty meant. William frequently wondered if he had observed enough. In order to help Catherine during her treatment and shield the family from public attention, the future king had been juggling his obligations. Expectations that went beyond personal matters were associated with the position of Prince of Wales, a royal title bestowed to the heir apparent and typically associated with training for future leadership. Beneath that duty, however, was a father who questioned whether he had overlooked his daughter's subtle cues that she needed him. A different kind of pain was carried by Catherine. She recalled times when Charlotte made an effort to look brave, smiling when she was nervous and maintaining her composure while she was having internal struggles. The princess realized that a young royal attending family events was visible to the general public. However, they observed a youngster in the home attempting to deal with dread while witnessing her mother battle a severe illness. Charlotte's behavior had changed during Catherine's treatment, according to a private family conversation recorded in a personal account shared inside the home. She grew more reserved, wary, and reluctant to communicate her emotions. William and Catherine came to the realization that their daughter had been affected emotionally by the circumstances in ways they could no longer deny. Camilla quickly joined the escalating conflict surrounding Charlotte's encounter. The little princess and the queen consort had a private talk that would later cause the family great distress. William and Catherine felt that the queen consort, the title bestowed upon the wife of a reigning monarch who assists the king in carrying out his duties without assuming the role of sovereign herself, was linked to a situation that needed careful consideration. One truth became more apparent the more the family reflected about the past. The announcement was not the start of Charlotte's battle. It began with a particular moment when her feelings were no longer concealed by a regal grin. The deeper conflict within the household and the conversation that altered everything would be revealed at that very moment. Charlotte's suffering took time to manifest. It started with a single incident that permanently altered the mood of the royal family, a moment that would eventually serve as the basis for the conflict at the palace. Every royal crisis has a turning point. That moment for Charlotte occurred at a private family get-together that was meant to provide comfort, but instead caused a wound that went unnoticed for months. William, Catherine, and others closest to the family never forgot the incident, since it became clear to them that Charlotte's emotional struggle was more profound than anybody had anticipated. William recalled the months when there was uncertainty in the Wales household. The family's routine had been altered by Catherine's cancer treatment, requiring the parents to cope with their own anxieties while safeguarding their kids. Although George, Charlotte, and Louis were still supposed to have typical childhood experiences, the family found it difficult to manage the emotional strain brought on by their mother's illness. Catherine put a lot of effort into maintaining stability around her kids, particularly Charlotte, who frequently attempted to comprehend circumstances that were beyond her age. The princess was aware that her daughter was observing every response, every dialogue, and every anxious moment. Managing a physical struggle was not the only problem. Youngsters who relied on their parents for security also had to have their emotional confidence preserved. Camilla was linked to the pivotal moment that altered everything. Following a family ceremony, the queen consort met with Charlotte in private at the palace to discuss her emotional response to the trying time. The young princess believed that her feelings were being ridiculed rather than consoled, which caused the talk to become traumatic, according to a family story that was documented after the incident. Charlotte was extremely affected by the discussion, and the family found it difficult to move on from the memories. When William found out what had transpired, he became enraged. The future king felt that Charlotte should have been patient with her weakness, especially at a time when she was already afraid for her mother's well-being. He felt that her feelings were not fully grasped and wondered how someone so young could be expected to carry royal expectations. When Charlotte eventually talked about the exchange, Catherine felt a different type of heartache. The princess discovered how profoundly the incident had impacted her daughter in a secret recorded conversation that was shared around the family. It dawned on her that Charlotte had not just been upset for a short while. She had been attempting to maintain her strength while bearing bewilderment and despair. William and Catherine's perspective on family boundaries was altered by that revelation. They started re-evaluating whether protecting Charlotte necessitated making tough choices and how much influence some members of the royal circle should have over their kids. One conversation was no longer the problem. It was about the next generation's emotional safety, accountability, and trust. The personal suffering could no longer be concealed. What started out as a family dispute was going to turn into a conflict that would put loyalty, power, and the monarchy's future stability to the test. At last, the moment William had shied away from came. The future king confronted Camilla in private about what had happened to Charlotte during one of the most precarious times in the family's history. There were no royal performances, no formal addresses, and no cameras. Just two family members were dealing with the psychological fallout from a moment had completely altered their lives. William was aware of the serious ramifications of the exchange. In a household based on loyalty and tradition, challenging a senior member of the royal family ran the risk of escalating hostilities. The prince was aware that his job as heir necessitated balance, but his fatherly responsibilities called for much more. He could no longer keep quiet about Charlotte's suffering. Camilla carried the burden of her own place in the monarchy when she joined the discussion. The title Queen Consort, which refers to the wife of the current monarch, who assists the king in carrying out his duties but does not possess the crown's sovereign authority, recognized that any decision made by the royal family might have an impact on public confidence. However, appearances were not the focus of this moment. It told the story of a young princess who, during one of the most trying times in her life, felt ignored. William was very clear in his statement. He assured her that while Charlotte was having difficulties, she didn't need to be criticized. She required understanding, tolerance, and compassion. The future king clarified that his daughter already carried a burden of anxiety due to Catherine's illness, and the last thing she needed was to feel burdened by her feelings. Because she thought her intentions had been misinterpreted, Camilla responded defensively. The Queen Consort said that rather than hurting Charlotte, she had attempted to help her navigate challenging emotions. However, the discussion soon exposed underlying frustrations that had been present for years. Long-standing disputes over expectations, influence, and family duties started to surface. William did not retreat. He disclosed that Charlotte's emotional shift had turned into a red flag for the whole family. He added that her stillness, withdrawal, and melancholy indicated that something more serious had occurred, according to a private narrative that was later shared inside the home. He thought it was the family's duty to act before the harm was irreversible. It became impossible to separate Catherine's involvement in the choice from the conflict, because she felt that safeguarding their children was more crucial than upholding appearances. The princess had backed the need for stricter boundaries. The pair clarified that their decisions were motivated by love and concern rather than rage or retaliation in a family conversation that was recorded. There was no simple way to resolve the conflict. Charlotte's traumatic experience was no longer the primary point of contention. It had turned into a conflict over authority, trust, and the royal family's future course. A much bigger question remained unanswered as William and Camilla left that discussion. Who actually had the ability to influence the monarchy's future? It revealed a more profound conflict about power, trust, and who could choose what was best for the coming generation. Families were based on trust, but the monarchy was based on tradition. Now, William and Catherine had to make the hardest decision of all. The choice was no longer just about a sad family dispute, even if preserving Charlotte meant altering how the royal household functioned. It came down to protecting a child who had secretly carried more than anyone knew, or maintaining harmony within the palace. With each day that went by, William felt the pressure mounting. As the heir apparent, it was his duty to honor the previous generation's while planning for the future of the monarchy. The prince was aware that every choice he made would have an impact on the organization as a whole, but he also recognized that Charlotte's emotional health could not be neglected. Catherine took a very personal approach to the matter. While observing her children's reactions to changes they were unable to fully comprehend, the princess had felt the anxiety and uncertainty of her own illness. She realized that royal children still required protection from the pressures associated with their family name. Therefore, her top duty was to provide mental security for Charlotte, George, and Louis. William found it difficult to deal with the fallout from defying family elders. Because public trust frequently hinged on the impression of stability, the future king understood the importance of unity within the monarchy. Beneath that duty, however, was a father who felt that remaining silent would convey the incorrect message. He was concerned that preserving tradition at the expense of his daughter's feelings would deepen the trauma. In private, Catherine advocated for stricter boundaries around Charlotte. She clarified that the young princess required comfort and time to heal from the mental stress she had gone through in a private discussion that was taped for a personal family account. Even though those decisions caused awkward discussions within the royal circle, the princess felt that love and protection had to take precedence over appearances. When Charles realized how serious the argument had grown, the decision became even more difficult. Family disputes might have broader repercussions, as the king, the term given to the current male monarch who represents the crown and has the highest royal responsibilities, realized. He saw that the conflict was no longer just between people. It was starting to upset the monarchy's equilibrium. In the end, William and Catherine came to a secret understanding. They made the decision that Charlotte's needs would take precedence above public expectations, and that it was their responsibility to safeguard their children's mental well-being. The decision was based on the conviction that the upcoming generation of royals required a different kind of assistance rather than out of rage. As the family was ready for the repercussions, Charles kept a close eye on the situation. The monarch was aware that choices pertaining to family borders, children, and senior royals might change relationships for years. Even while the alterations caused unease among those closest to the throne, William was adamant that they would remain in place. The decision had been taken, but judgments made within the monarchy were seldom kept secret for very long. The emotional toll of this family conflict would soon start to extend outside the palace walls. It was impossible to remain silent after the altercation. Every member of the royal family had to confront the true implications of the declaration. It signified that Charlotte's emotions were at last acknowledged. For William and Catherine, it meant acknowledging that making tough decisions was necessary to keep their kids safe. For Camilla, it also meant facing the fallout from an event that altered her bond with the Wales family. William was immediately affected by the choice. The future king was aware that his actions had caused conflict within the royal family, but he felt that Charlotte's safety came before any pain. The prince had spent years learning how to reconcile his own feelings with the demands of the royal family. However, this circumstance made him decide between maintaining harmony and sticking up for his daughter. Camilla dealt with the fallout in secret. The queen consort became aware that William and Catherine's perception of her participation with their children had changed as a result of the talk. She was frustrated that her intentions had been misinterpreted in a documented personal narrative that she provided following the argument. She felt that she had made an effort to assist, but she now had to acknowledge that trust had been betrayed. Charlotte had changed, and Catherine saw this as a sign of hope. After feeling heard and encouraged, the princess watched her daughter gradually start expressing herself once more. These little moments were significant because Charlotte's emotional healing signified more than just a kid regaining comfort. It demonstrated that admitting one's suffering could be the first step to recovery. The monarchy had its own problems, even within a family where appearances were frequently quite important. The institution relied on unity as the family worked to preserve stability, particularly since public trust was linked to the royal household's handling of trying times. Because he had to take into account both family ties and the duty of upholding the crown's reputation, the king's role grew more complex. Charles was aware that the argument could not be written off as a personal family issue. The king realized that being loyal to the kingdom did not entail putting aside personal grief. He admitted in a taped interview with close advisors that honesty was necessary to preserve family ties, even when the reality caused awkward rifts. Those who thought William had taken the conflict too far continued to criticize him. Some claimed that confronting older family members ran the risk of causing needless turmoil. As this chapter comes to a close, one question remains. Can a monarchy built on tradition also protect the emotional well-being of the children who represent its future? For William and Catherine, the answer appears clear. No royal duty, public appearance, or palace expectation is more important than the safety and happiness of their children. Whether these reported events ultimately strengthen or deepen divisions within the royal family, only time will tell. But one thing is certain, the decisions made behind palace walls today could shape the monarchy for generations to come. What do you think? Did William and Catherine make the right decision to put Charlotte's emotional well-being first, or should family unity have taken priority? Share your thoughts respectfully in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss our next royal update. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.